Great. So just to start off, I wanted to do a brief introduction of myself and kind of the purpose of today's webinar. Okay, perfect. It looks like someone said the link wasn't working for them and had to call in via phone, so not a problem. But anyways, to introduce myself, my name is Morgan Haddon, and I am the program coordinator for a nonprofit organization called Get Healthy Utah. And in fact, I'm going to take just a quick moment here to share my screen and give a brief introduction on why or what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so can everyone see that? Yeah, I think so. Great. So like I was saying, I'm the program coordinator for a nonprofit organization called Get Healthy Utah. And Get Healthy Utah, in partnership with the Utah Leagues of Cities and Towns, helps to manage the Healthy Utah Community Designation Program. Now, I'm going to assume that a lot of the people on the call today are already pretty familiar with this designation program. At least, hopefully, you've at least heard about it. And some of you, your community may already be designated. Some of you may be working on the designation right now. Or others, you might just be a community that's interested in learning a little bit more on how you can promote active living. So wherever you are in the designation process or the learning process, that's great. As part of this designation, what we've done is we are trying to build out a learning network where we provide opportunities like this webinar to help educate cities and towns on what they can do to create a healthy environment in their community. And so today's topic of the webinar is specifically on what cities and towns can do to promote active living. I want to point out that, at Utah, we often talk about how we're one of the healthiest states in the nation, which is true and which is absolutely fantastic. But sometimes it's easy to get lulled into, I guess you could say, a false sense of security with that, right? Like, oh, health isn't a big deal for Utah. We're doing great. But if you do take a step back and look at the data, one thing we know is that even though, relatively speaking, we're pretty healthy compared to the rest of the nation, just like the rest of the nation, we aren't on a great health trajectory. And so I wanted to point out here that you can see here we've got increasing rates of obesity in the state. We have increasing rates of chronic illness. And part of what's fueling this decline in health is that health behaviors are slipping as well throughout the state. So since we're talking about active living specifically today, I wanted to share a little bit of data and just shared that in Utah specifically, only about 1 out of 2, so about half of all adults meet the daily recommended guidelines for physical activity, which is 150 minutes of moderate to intense exercise a week with about 2 days of strength training exercises as well. What's a little bit concerning is that our pipeline coming up, so our teens, when typically the teen years when you're in sports and whatnot tends to be some of people's most active years, we know that teenagers aren't getting enough exercise either. In fact, only 1/4 of all teenagers are meeting physical activity recommendations, and we actually see a big dip in that when it comes to teenage girls as well. So teenage boys, about 25% of them get enough exercise, but for teenage girls, only about 15% of them do. And so that's where cities and towns can come in, is a city's role in health and in promoting active living isn't necessarily, of course, to mandate exercise or, do things that mandate for someone what they should do for their own health. But instead, what cities and towns can do is provide opportunities for people to be healthy and opportunities for active living. And so with the Healthy Utah Community Designation, we do offer some recommended strategies on our website and in the application on what cities and towns can do to promote active living, such as conducting a messaging campaign to promote physical activity, offering free and low-cost community sports programs, and so on. So you can see here, this is just a preset list that we've created and offer on our website. And another thing that we do to provide you with some ideas is we've created a menu of services with different programs that you can look at that can be implemented in your community, like the Girls on the Run after school program. They have a statewide reach, and if you want to introduce that to your community, we have some contact information where you can reach out to them. But also when it comes to the designation, we are very willing to look at different strategies that maybe your community comes up with on your own. So when I say strategies, a community has to implement a certain number of health strategies to qualify. And so when we're talking today, I would just invite you to be really open-minded and be creative and hopefully get some ideas of what you can do to promote active living in your community. Whether or not it's on the recommended list that we provide with the designation, if you have a great idea and you implement it in your community and it has a positive effect on active living, it can absolutely count as a strategy towards the designation. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and stop talking here pretty soon, because we have an excellent panel of people who are going to present to us today and share about some of the active living strategies that they've implemented in their own community. And what I'm planning to do is go through and just do some guided questions with them for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end for each of you. We'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. But I do want to mention, if you have questions along the way as they're talking, definitely feel free to raise your hand or throw them in the chat. We're very open to accepting questions, as we go along too. So you don't necessarily have to save them to the end if it's relevant to the current conversation. But with that, we are very lucky, like I said, to have three excellent panelists here with us today. From Vineyard, we have Morgan Brim, who is the Community Development Director. From Annabella, we have Jill Anderson, who is a city council member. And from Kanab, we have Danielle Ramsey, who is the treasurer for their community. So rather than reading their bio, I'm going to turn the time over to each of them to do a quick introduction. And let's see, Morgan from Vineyard, can we go ahead and start with you? And can you tell us who you are, what your position is, and just a little bit about your community?
Yeah, no problem. And it's great to meet a fellow Morgan. Hopefully we're getting to where kind of the organization is wanting us to go. As a city, we have put a lot into making sure that we're very active. But like kind of my overall, I guess, like bio is I've been in city planning for about 15 years. I've worked across the country in the DC area, in Idaho, and here, obviously in Utah. And city planning is a really interesting field that allows you to truly help elevate the quality of life of your residents. And by doing that, like active transportation is probably one of the most important ways of doing that. And so a big goal of kind of, I would say also like a mission of my own career and just of the city, that's where it aligns nicely, is that try to marry kind of the economic development that a lot of cities want. Cities want to offset their tax base with the quality of life. And what we found is kind of where those two intersect is with providing active transportation. So that's a lot from the active, like healthy lifestyle. Like that's where the city has put a lot of investment in is kind of the active transportation system, and then also providing like the overall programming. But that's kind of like me in a nutshell. About 15 years working in the industry, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome, fantastic, thanks Morgan. And let's go ahead and Danielle Ramsey, if you want to do the same thing, do a little introduction.
Yeah, I'm Danielle Ramsey, and before becoming treasurer just a few months ago for Kanab City, I served as the recreation director. So that's kind of my tie to the Utah Healthy City designation. And before that, I worked in the King County Tourism Office for a few years. So that's a little bit about my background. A little bit about Kanab. We're a small community on the southern border of the state. We border Arizona, and our population is just under 5,000 people. We probably are closer to that within the last year or so, but we're located next to like Grand Canyon, Zion National Park, Bryce Canyon, Lake Powell. So our outdoor recreation opportunities are abundant. We have a lot of cool trail systems and outdoor recreation opportunities for our residents and then people that visit our community. So that's Kanab in a nutshell.
Awesome, thank you so much. And actually, I feel bad, you might see my eyes flickering side to side again. We're going to have Jill Anderson on as representing Annabella, but I haven't seen her hop on yet. So with that, I've emailed her a couple times. We'll see if she's able to hop on. She might just be having some technical difficulties or something. So if not, Morgan and Danielle, you might be the two panelists out of the three. So we'll just keep going and see if Jill hops on. She was going to be our voice for rural communities. So if any of you here in the audience are from a rural community and have anything to chip in as we're speaking, feel very welcome to do that. So with that, we'll go ahead and just get started with the questions. So we wanted to start out by asking, what is one thing your community has done to improve physical activity that you are particularly proud of? And then describe the process your community went through to accomplish that. And we'll go ahead and Morgan, we'll start out with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you. So early on, so I guess to tell just a little bit about Vineyard. Vineyard is located right in kind of the heart of the urbanized area of Utah County. So we're next to Orem, and then we have our western boundary is Utah Lake Shoreline Trail, or Utah Lake, and then we've been building out that our trail that runs along there. And I would say that's a pretty major investment that the city took on early on, was that we knew that the people moving to Vineyard, a lot of them were moving here because they wanted to be by the lake. They wanted to be in a community that was lakeside, that was active, that was fun, they could get out. And so as we built out, because we grew from about 150 residents in 2010 to about 21,000 in 2023. So we're the fastest growing in Utah. And even in the nation per like share of population. So that's about a 10,000+% growth rate, which is easy when you're only 150 residents, but it sounds impressive if you say it the other way. But so we had the opportunity of trying to build our active infrastructure with the communities. So as each neighborhood built, we ensured that every neighborhood had a trail connection, and that was serviced by trails, and that all of our trails link together, and then they bring you down to the lake. So those were like our early years of kind of the trail building. And really, I would say back then the focus was on recreation. And we can get into later kind of some of our next initiatives that we set off, but really that kind of that recreational framework of that trail has really provided us a great basis for building off of that. And we are so lucky to have had great leaders, like when the city was first being built, that said, hey, okay, you want to build houses, you want to build a 200 house subdivision, well, we need a trail, and that trail needs to go to the lake. That was kind of the focus then, was the lakes and parks. And by doing that, it created a wonderful network. And so almost all of our neighborhoods are kind of like webbed with a network of trails. And I would say that was such a big thing, because I've worked in other cities that are built out, and trying to build even like a mile segment of a trail, you're buying right of way, you're negotiating with property owners, is super expensive. But if you can do it as you build, it's such I guess a preferred way of doing it. It makes it so much easier. And we were lucky to have that vision early on to help us accomplish that.
Awesome. Great. I think it makes me kind of excited to go visit Vineyard. I don't know if I've spent a ton of time down there myself, but
come on down. We'll take you on a bike tour.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. And Danielle, same question for you. What is something that Kanab has done to promote active living that you're particularly proud of? And then if you could describe that process of achieving that.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we're most proud of is probably our park facility that we have that's located in the center of town. Just over the past probably about decade, in addition to our beautiful park, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Kanab or has been to our Jacob Hamlin Park, but it's like one of the most beautiful parks in the state. I might be a little bit biased, but it's beautiful. But right next to that, it's located, we have like a 4-field baseball complex. We have a skate park and pump track. We have an outdoor basketball court, I think with like 8 basketball hoops. And then we also have a tennis court and pickleball courts that are located right across the street. And so it gives us an opportunity. Oh, and I forgot to mention our swimming pool, our outdoor seasonal swimming pool is right there as well. So with having it all just located in the same space, it allows us to host some events and play off of each other. Like just a couple weeks ago, we have this huge baseball tournament that we host every year, and it brings like close to 50 teams. And one of the things that they compliment us on the most is the location of the baseball fields, because after the games or whatever, they can go and play pickleball, they can play tennis, their kids bring their scooters and their skateboards and all that, and they get to play on the skate park, and then they can hit up the pool. So just being able to invest in that entire park facility and have it all located in the same spot is something we're really proud of. And it's also within walking distance to 3 of our trails. So part of our trail system in Kanab and King County is located right next to our park and our city library. So it's just, that's probably the thing that I would say Kanab is most proud of.
Awesome, that's great. And what was the timeline like for that? Like, was it all completed around the same time? Have you just been adding to it as the years?
So we've been adding to it, yeah. So the park was actually donated by a local family, the Gardner family. They actually own Stampin' Up. I'm sure you've heard of them. They donated a lot of the materials and time and everything to get our park to where it is today. And then we had a very passionate city council member. I'm not sure the exact timing. It predated me being with the city, but she was really passionate about getting this skate park and pump track built and completed. And so it took years of them fundraising. I mean, I remember seeing mason jars in the grocery stores asking for donations. Like, that's how they raised the money, a lot of the money for the skate park and pump track. And it was just a solid team effort on a lot of parts. I believe our tourism office played a hand in that. And so that was completed. Our pool was completed about 15 years ago, around the same time as our park. And then our baseball fields, a lot of it honestly was like Eagle Scout projects over the course of many, many years, and volunteer projects and stuff like that. So I think that's what makes us even more proud of it, is the community effort that took place to get all of these, all the infrastructure in place. And then our tennis courts and pickleball courts, I think, were the most recent facility to be built. And I want to say they're close to 8 years old now, but like I said, don't quote me on that because I'm not sure the exact timeline of that, but it took many years to get to where we're at, but solid team effort for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I know that funding often can feel so daunting when it comes to a large project like that. So I love kind of that detail that, you know, the community level fundraising too helped make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty great. Well, perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and ask, I'm sure your community is doing, you know, a lot of different things, kind of like a multi-pronged approach to active living. So are there any other projects that Kanab has done to promote active living that you're proud of, right? So that's the big thing, kind of the crowning jewel, but what other things is Kanab doing?
I would say one of the bigger things we've done recently is, which I think we included like in our application when we got this designation, was we created it's called the Healthy King County Coalition. And it's a group of just like-minded people that are passionate about healthy living, healthy eating, healthy lifestyles for the community. And we have representatives like from Kanab City, King County. We've hired an executive director to head up the coalition. And by doing so, you just bring these people together and they meet monthly and they come up with really cool ideas and events. And I mean, we've had walking challenges in our elementary schools. We've done a back to school triathlon that goes along with like our back to school night every year. It's really cool to have the infrastructure in place, but then have a group of people that are passionate about things that are kind of giving us an opportunity to show off that infrastructure that we have. And we've come a long ways from when that coalition was created to now, and just the equity we have in that coalition is huge. They do amazing things for our community, and it's been awesome to see what they've accomplished.
That's great. Yeah, actually, so I I'm one of the people who goes through the different applications when a community applies to be a Healthy Utah community designation. And I think just even remembering back to Kanab's application, I think that was something that kind of stood out as something pretty great that you were doing. Is not only did you have the infrastructure in place, but then you were doing a lot of these different programs to help make sure that the infrastructure was being utilized once it was in place. So
the programs are well received in the community. We keep thinking, like, is it going to grow? Is it going to grow? Are people going to respond well to these? And when we do these challenges and these events, we're always shocked at the amount of people that sign up and participate. So it's been fun to see.
That's great. Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think like you were saying that walking challenge with schools where if I'm not mistaken, you give out pedometers and had over 1 million steps recorded. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes, we did that again this year. And we do it as like a countywide effort because kids like to compete with one another. So we have 3 elementary schools in our school district. So we have Valley Elementary in Orderville, we have Kanab Elementary in Kanab, and then we have Big Water. And we just average out the steps that each school gets. And the winning school gets PE equipment for their school. And so there's some, I think like $2,000 worth of PE equipment to the winning school. So there's some high stakes there. And it's been fun to see them all compete with one another and how many steps are logged in that walking challenge. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Is that coordinated by that health coalition that you were mentioning?
Yeah. The Healthy King County Coalition is the one that coordinates that program.
Well, very fun. I think that's a great program and a great example of something fun and hopefully relatively simple to pull off. So
yes, yep.
All right, and we'll go back to you, Morgan, and ask what some other projects are that Vineyard is doing.
Sure. I feel like Danielle should teach a master class. I want to take notes on all these things. I especially love the mason jar idea. I think I'm gonna steal that from her. So we're doing a lot of really interesting projects. One of the big initiatives was to try and push for local food and being able to produce food locally. There's something about growing a tomato or growing cucumbers that you put the effort into and then you harvest it and you're able to eat it, that really I think provides a really good connection with people and their food source, and it's also really sustainable. And so we it was something that we had talked about for a while. And then one year we're just like, okay, we just have to do it. We have to start a community garden. And we pulled together some like little grow boxes, and it was kind of funny. It all just kind of happened really, really quickly, and the community came out and were really supportive of it. And they helped us assemble boxes. We put in like drip lines, and it was only 11 boxes in the community garden, but it helped to create a really nice community kind of centered around food and just being able to have kind of more pride in your community. And every year that's doubled. And so now we're at, I think it's like 44 boxes. So now it's spread out between 2 community gardens, and there's plans to expand further and to keep building more and more kind of space for that. But I really see that as being just such a successful project, because not only did it help people to provide kind of local food that they themselves can grow, and with that cost of food right now, it's incredible. There's a huge demand for it. But also, I really think it created a sense of community in our public open spaces, because we put these community gardens within our park system. And we've seen it's provided just a really nice like little social network where folks can come together, they learn from each other, they teach each other their different techniques, they share food, and then they also raise any of their extra food they give out during it's like a Bua Palooza in October. It's like a Halloween event, but the community garden folks, they bring all the produce that they don't want, and they give it out to the community. So it's really funny. So you have like the kids going and getting candy from each station, and then at the end we have this huge area just filled with like produce. and believe it or not, that's like one of the most popular booths there, and all of the produce just gets it gets taken really quickly. And so it's kind of a fun way to also kind of intermix like healthy eating, locally sourced in in an event that typically is for like kind of candy and unhealthy stuff like that. So that's been a big one, and the city council really wants to keep pushing that. There's a lot of support from the community. I would also say, as some of our other initiatives would be with our downtown. We recently opened a front runner station, and that's been really big for us. That's a commuter rail station that brings people to Salt Lake, if you're not from this area, and it connects kind of the Wasatch Front. And being able to get that station was really important. It provided really kind of the building block of a larger vision for a downtown. And so the city is in a process of developing a downtown, and the guiding principle of that downtown is walkability. So whenever we design a street, we design a park, an open space, anything connecting to the train station, it's all about, okay, how do we prioritize the person who's walking, and the next is the person who's biking, and then next is a vehicle. Still providing the space for cars and being able to park, but not making that the primary mode, and really putting the focus on the more vulnerable mode users. You know, if a car and a pedestrian have a collision, it's typically going to be the pedestrian who's going to come at it, you know, in the worst way possible. And so really kind of prioritizing from a kind of a safety standpoint, the pedestrian and the bicycle. And what we've seen is, as we've been able to do that, because we've done that in other cities, we've seen kind of the overall rate of active transportation users start to increase. But we still have a lot more to do. But I would say that's a really big initiative, is just making our downtown as like a centerpiece for the city, and making that core area super safe, very walkable, bikeable, a place where you'd feel really comfortable just riding right in the street with your kids. And so all the streets they're more narrow, they're slower, great bike lanes. And the bike lanes, a lot of them are buffered bike lanes. And so it's not just a bike lane that's painted on a street, it's a bike lane that'll have a separation with the landscaping, or parking will buffer it from the vehicular traffic. And so just putting like a big emphasis on the walkability and the biking. That's a really important project for us.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you for mentioning that. I know we've gotten a couple of applications from communities that are trying to do something similar, like revitalize downtown by promoting that walkability aspect of it. That's huge. And I also love that you mentioned community gardens. I know where I live, so I live pretty close to the Jordan River Trail, and I'll go out on, you know, long Saturday bike ride or something like that. And what I found really interesting since I recently moved where I'm at is I will pass about 3 community gardens that are right on the edge of this trail as I'm going by, and I'll literally see, you know, people out there working in the community garden. I ride by on my bike, I wave. So I really do love that sense of community that it brings. That's fantastic. I know since Annabella wasn't able to be on, that we did want a little bit of the rural voice too. So I might share just a couple of examples that I know that they were planning on talking about from some of my conversations with them. But Annabella also has a really big focus on trails too, where they did create like a town kiosk that has a map of all of the different trails near their area. If you don't know where Annabella is, it's central Utah, like pretty much smack dab in the middle of the state, has less than 1,000 people. So they've tried really hard to make sure that trails are available. But then another thing that I love is they had an old church building that they repurposed into their community rec center. And they're such a small community that they actually provided a key to this recreation center to each of the residents in their community, each of the families, so that anyone within the community can go and access that old church building and access the basketball court that's in there, and access, you know, some weights and a little indoor gym that they've put in there. And so I really do love, you know, you work with what you've got, right? If you've got like a front runner or tracks line coming into your community, you know, that's a big focus, getting the walkability there. If you feel like you don't have a lot, just getting a little bit creative on saying, okay, what resources do we have? You know, we have this old church building that's no longer being used, and then, you know, being really creative about repurposing things. So thank you so much for those examples. I really appreciate that. And hopefully so far they've been able to help generate some ideas, like some tangible go-to things for different communities. One thing I wanted to ask is about overcoming barriers to implementing some of these programs and these ideas. So if you want to touch for a moment about what some of the biggest barriers you faced when trying to promote, you know, some of these active living ideas or strategies in your communities, like what have the barriers been, and then what have you been able to do to successfully overcome them? And Danielle, if you want to kick that off first.
Yeah, so being a smaller community, I think one of our biggest barriers is funding, especially on a city level. We are fortunate within the county, King County, we rely heavily on transient room tax. We receive millions of visitors every year, and so that's where a big chunk of our funding comes from. But as a city, we only receive a small percentage in comparison to what the county receives, right? So on a city level, funding is definitely probably the biggest barrier. And some ways that trying to overcome that is partnering. So I think once again, like that's when the coalition plays a huge part in being able to do some of these things, because we actually, as a coalition, the history of the coalition is a little bit unique. Like it started as part of like the Southwest Public Health Department, and they kind of dissolved the position and what the coalition was doing. And so we kind of went into panic mode recently, and we're like, what are we going to do? We feel like our efforts are still worthwhile. We want to continue this. So we went to the King County Commissioners and asked if they would fund the coalition annually. And they committed to, I believe it's close to $50,000 every year to be able to provide these programs and all the things that we want to do, and fund the executive director position as a part-time contract person. And so being able to have, like I said, the buy-in from the coalition to be able to go to the county and get that funding from them was huge. And then having somebody that represents like Kanab City and some of our other organizations on that coalition, we just able to add to that benefit, where the city maybe can't contribute as much financially. We can with infrastructure and helping, host the events and things like that. So just being able to have those partnerships, we've been able to overcome some of the funding issues. But one of our biggest barriers in Kanab is why we have a lot of outdoor recreation opportunities. Our indoor recreation is really lacking, and a recreation center has been something that has been discussed for many, many years. We have a council that's very passionate about that now and is trying to move forward with a rec center. And so what we're doing is partnering with King County once again, because they have more funding than we do available. And so there's actually discussions taking place now that hopefully we can get some engineered drawings and get some plans made up and all that, so that we can move forward with a rec center. It's just, our town is unique in a sense where we have a strong youth presence, but we're also getting a lot of retirees. And so what the community really needs, like what are the priorities and what all do we put in a rec center that's actually attainable? Like affordability is huge, but we also want to make sure that we recognize all our different user groups. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge. I think everyone's aware of what pickleball's done in the last couple of years. It's just completely taken off, and we lack facilities for that. And then when it comes to our youth, we have, I think, close to 200 kids in our youth basketball program, and we're sharing one gym. And so we're lacking that with those indoor facilities. And so hopefully with this partnership between the city and King County, we can move forward and break down some of those barriers with funding to get a rec center in the works.
Yeah, thank you. I actually really appreciate that you say that, because Utah, with having some of the greatest snow on earth, it does have some unique challenges during winter when it comes to getting active. So I love that you brought that piece into it, that we can be considering what opportunities are there to be active when the weather is warm, but also when the weather isn't warm, and are there indoor opportunities to be active. So thank you. That's a great point. And then, yeah, Morgan, whatever, if you want to touch on whatever barriers Vineyard has faced and some things you've done to overcome them.
Sure. I would say with, the lake is such a big part of the community and like the daily lives of the people that live there. It's really kind of a focal point. I've really found that there's definitely been a perception issue with Utah Lake. A lot of people look at it as just like, it's like a gross lake, it's filled with bugs, but it's really a beautiful place. And so like helping to really kind of share the message of what Utah Lake is and what it can become. It's always been invested in. There's now a really great coalition with the Utah Lake Authority and the cities that live around the lake that have really come together and been really united in the purpose of making the lake better and better. So I've seen that over the years, just the overall perception of the lake kind of improving. But you'll hear about the algae bloom, and that'll get posted all over the media. When in reality, it's affecting kind of maybe a small portion of the lake, and it's a small part of the summer. But those all are real things that we are working on. And so I think like helping people understand that the lake is such a great recreational asset, that it's a place that you should come down and check out. Our little Vineyard Beach area, it's probably one of the most popular places for windsurfing. I would say probably in Utah. You go down there anytime, especially like on a Saturday, you'll have 10 different people out there just windsurfing. It's really cool, and I don't think that like those kind of things have really been like I guess advertised as well as we could, and that's probably something we need to do a better job at. But the lake gets a lot of great wind, and so that helps. It's also a wonderful place for kind of environmental tourism. Folks that want to go down there and do birding. Birding's really starting to take off. You see it a lot at the Great Salt Lake. Utah Lake is a fantastic place to go and see just really unique birds. It's in conjunction with Salt Lake, it's one of the major migration areas in North America. And so kind of advertising those things, and if you're a local resident, you know of it, but from the outside too, just letting people understand that there's a lot of really fun and special things that you can do down there. I was also I would say a really big obstacle is our existing infrastructure. Like I talked about before, we were able to build trail systems, and I say multi-use paths that are like disconnected from the road throughout the community. But also a lot of our roads were built to be very, very wide and have very high posted speed limits. And so that, like people drive as fast as the infrastructure allows them to. So if you're driving on a road that is designed like a highway, even if it's 30 miles an hour, you're going to drive 50. And so trying to use our existing infrastructure, say, okay, this could actually be a real benefit. We have a lot of right of way. Instead of giving 95% of that to the vehicle, why don't we start to pare that down and still move the same amount of traffic, but provide really safe infrastructure for bicycles, provide lots of crossings. And that I think that's what we lack right now is our collector roads that kind of split up the city. They really are barriers. And when we've done public outreach, like what is stopping you from riding your bike? What is stopping you from walking to the park or to the school? It's always the roads, and specifically the intersections. Parents don't feel safe having their kids walk to the park if they have to cross our main street. And I think that's really unfortunate. And so looking at ways that we can take our existing infrastructure and say, okay, it's great. It's really wide. That gives us a lot of space to build some great infrastructure for bikes and for pedestrians. But how do we do that while still being able to move traffic? And so it is an obstacle, but we also have kind of looked at it as an opportunity. It provides the space that we need to accommodate all modes of traffic. And I would say too, just to kind of add on, funding is huge. I mean, that's so big. With a lot of what we're trying to do, it takes money, and I think kind of what Danielle talked about is, the kind of the grassroots efforts. That's something the city's been trying to push. What we typically do is the city will put up just a really small amount of money, and then like $500 to $1,000 a year, and then we turn it into a community project where we hand that over to the community, and we have them build some project that the community really wants. And what's funny, all the projects that the community wants, they tend to be recreation, making like providing benches on trails, access points down to the lake. And so like even just giving it to the community and the stuff that they prioritize is interesting. They it seems like the leadership of the community and the public, they all align in kind of their aspirations of what they want the community to be.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. And it's interesting you say that. I was actually at an active transportation meeting today where they invited public comment, and there's someone who that was specifically their comment is they don't feel safe on some of these bigger roads that were already built that way, and they were just begging for some bike lanes because they wanted to start biking more during the summer and just felt they were having a big problem with that. So I appreciate that. One idea, just throwing that out there, that I've heard some different like WFRC talk about, or some different communities have done, is if you are, wanting to provide some safer bike lanes, but lack the funding to really change that existing infrastructure, one strategy or technique is setting up temporary bike lanes, is what they call it, with different cones and just using cones to create a temporary barrier. And place for people to bike on existing roads. So of course, it all depends on the road and the community, what you're able to do, but just something to keep in mind that can be a low cost way to start with some of those changes.
That's a great idea. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And so with that, we are getting up to time, but I did want to open it up to the audience here and see if there were any questions, and you're welcome to just go off of mute or to drop a question in the chat if you have one. I'll give it just a minute here. Okay, well, sometimes I think that's a really good sign if there's not questions. I think usually that means things have been explained pretty well. If you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. But one thing that I wanted to note is that if you and your community, if you want to start implementing some of these active living strategies on our Get Healthy Utah website, let's see, I'm going to try to share my screen here and point out a resource page that we have. If you go to gethealthyutah.org/Healthy Utah Community, we do have this page where it's all about active living strategies and then associated resources to help your community implement some of these things. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to conduct a messaging campaign to promote physical activity in your community. You can come down here and here's some different toolkits that you or your health coalition could use to get started. If you wanted to add wayfinding signage to some of your existing trails, here's a bunch of like guidelines and examples and just different companies that you can reach out to. So in our follow-up email, we will send this out to you so that each of you can review that in case you want to get started, in case you want some of those resources. Also, if you would be willing to take a couple of minutes to complete a survey to let us just provide your feedback on these webinars. We are trying to offer them once every 2 months, and we want to make sure that we're providing content and addressing topics that are relevant to you and what you're doing. So I will go ahead and drop in the chat a link to a survey. If you could just it should take about 30 seconds to complete. That would be hugely appreciated and will help guide us in the topics that we choose for future webinars. And with that, our executive director, Alicia, is here too. Alicia, do you have anything that you want to add?
Say Hugh dropped a question in the chat asking Vineyard if they had an example of their code where trails are required with development.
Yeah, if you want, I can take like 5 seconds to do a quick screen share to show it. I pulled it up to show the group if you guys want to see it, and then I can drop a link in there too if you'd like. So if you allow Sharon, I can be quick on it.
Yeah, I think you can do it now.
Let's see.
Sure. So are you able to see the screen right here that shows kind of street sections?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is our downtown code. And one thing that we found that was really important is you need to be very specific when you're wanting a developer to build something. You can't just say like, hey, we want trails and we want good pedestrian infrastructure, because then they'll build a 4-foot sidewalk. Not all developers will do that, but you really do need to be specific. So in our downtown, we have several cross sections and we said, okay, as you build these streets, this is how the street cross section needs to look like. And so you can see in here, if you see my cursor, it shows, bike trails that are separated. They have park strips and street parking that provides that buffer, a lot of space for pedestrians. We have different promenades that run down the middle and providing the walkability on the outside of the streets near the building frontages, but also on the interior streets. So we have promenade parks, linear parks that take you through the city from the train station all the way down to the lake. So the idea is to create a really exciting kind of interesting walking experience. Because a lot of what stops people from walking, believe it or not, is just if it's boring, if it's bland, you're seeing the same thing over and over. But if you provide like a really creative, interesting walking experience, it's kind of an adventure. And so that was the idea with how we've been designing our infrastructure, that you have kind of these neat open spaces that also double as kind of the street infrastructure. And so anyway, this is just a good example of some of the roads that require the bike lanes, the sidewalks, and like the safety mechanisms and buffering that we want to help kind of provide the separation between the vehicular traffic and pedestrians and cyclists. But I can drop this link in the chat as well.
That's awesome. I just wanted to give a shout out. We did have a funding opportunity the past few months for our Active People Healthy Utah demonstration project, and many cities applied for that. And we were able to award Ephraim, Santa Quin, and West Valley City. So we're excited for that opportunity too. It's going to be a 6-month learning collaborative piece with this. And so I think really getting partners together, as we talked about coalitions and the strength of having expertise across, active transportation, parks and rec, and all these different pieces. And so we're excited to start on this project with those chosen cities and share those learnings with all of our other cities, our other Healthy Utah communities. And so Get Healthy Utah wants to have those funding opportunities. We know funding is a huge barrier, and we always don't have a ton of funding at Get Healthy Utah, but we have other partners that do. And so we want to keep everyone in the loop when there are opportunities. We'll share that in our newsletter so that we can figure out the funding barrier, which we know is a concern. So we're grateful for all your interest and for applying to our opportunities, and are here as a resource as well. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We certainly appreciate that you've spent the time to come and learn about promoting active living in your community, and want to do a huge shout out to Danielle and Morgan for everything that they shared with us today. So thank you so much. And with that, be watching out for an email. We'll send the link to the recording as well as some resources. So everyone, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Morgan.